Hey there, it's Otter. Let's talk about the discontinuation of the DM MD frames, input cards, output cards, and the transmitters and receivers. I think back to the mid and late 2000s when HDMI came on the scene, right? First starting in residential with Blu-ray players, but there was a recognizable thing there that this new HDMI connector, one, had a distance problem, two, had this content protection problem. Two things that needed to be solved. So as we roll around into 2009, here comes digital media. And the first set out the gate, of course, are the MD frames, right? The 8x8 and the 16x16 with their input cards, their transmitters, their receivers. And I was fortunate enough to be part of that pre-release candidate group that got a whole bunch of this stuff and was asked to go ahead and implement it and install it. So I did here within my house. So I had an 8x8, had 6 zones of video, had 7 or 8 systems, things like Blu-ray players, gaming systems, had a various bunch of stuff. Hooked it all up, ran the 3-conductor fire hose cable, got all that done, took a few days, but up and running, and was able to move basically my, at that time, Apple TV from down here in my basement all the way to my original office upstairs. And I was just pretty amazed. This was really, really cool. So as we fast forward through time, there were evolutions. Things changed. We went from 3-wire to 1-wire, lining us up with things like other infrastructure sets where you got one cable and it does everything you need it to do, audio, video, all that. And then we got AG+, brought us into the 4K world. Another transition that took place. And each one of those transitions and upgrades was, hey, there's a couple days there to replace some infrastructure, swap out the cards, swap out the transmitters, receivers, right? And going through that process. Well, come into the late teens, 2000 teens, here comes this product called DM NVX. And I'm like, okay, here we go again. Lucky enough, because I had the DM base, was asked to go ahead and make the transition out. So we did our input counts, we did our output counts. I get a stack of boxes, which was about half the size of the original box sets that I would get for the replacements and upgrades that I had done through the original DM. And it was about 4 hours to get the infrastructure done. Now, I still use the HE cable, so I didn't have to repull infrastructure, so there was some time savings there. But the fact is that within 4 hours, I had audio and video in every location, including integration into my distributed audio system. Flat out, called Fred, said, this is amazing. Now, did it come with challenges? Sure, there were always challenges along the way. And one of the biggest changes for me was, I got to put a network switch in here. So I slap an SG350 in the middle of the rack, hook it up, go find the instructions, walk through the processes, and do all that. Now, I'm lucky because I'm the network administrator here at my house. That's not true everywhere. But that was the one thing that was different in my transition from the original and traditional DM to NVX was when I took the 8x8 and put the network switch in, that was a different set of rules. However, everything about ED-ID, managing content, getting signal from point A to point B, all the same. Changed over my programming Saturday, we're up and running. Nobody in the family actually knew I made a transition other than I had been in rooms and changed out some boxes, grumbled a little bit because of my poor installation practices. That's a personal thing, and I'll admit to it. But that transition was inevitable. Ultimately, if we look back, and hindsight's 2020, is looking back at it, that course, that trajectory that brought us to NVX was inevitable. The fact that the network and technologies evolved to let us come up with a 4K 44460 signal over a 1 gig link, and now beyond that today, was an inevitable transition. It was going to happen. Well, now we're at that point where, unfortunately, or fortunately, the DM MDs, their cards in the boxes, transmitters and receivers, are going to be retired. They're leaving production. Now, AV over IP is nothing new. That initial transition I talked about personally took place in 2018. So I have been running and upgrading my NVX along the way after I made that transition. Of course, it was optional, right? I could have still used the DMAG stuff all day. I could have stuck with that and we could have kept going. And as a standard sets, when you look and think about it from a standard point of view, that's been a long time, tried and true traditional mechanism for how we transport video. But now it's time to transition. And with that transition comes a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So what I want you to know is that, one, we're not asking you to do something new. We're looking at doing something different. And with that, there's a couple specific areas that I think where most of the questions are going to lie. And those questions are going to be centered around network challenges there. There may be some I/O and form factor challenges because there's not a direct one-to-one. But the more I look at it and the more I think about the process as I move through it, the more things changed, the more they ended up staying the same. To demonstrate that, we're going to take a look at a few things and answer a few questions. But I want you to know, it's Crestron. Your dealer, integrator, Crestron representative, technical director, the Crestron's sales support services, we're all here to help get answers to your questions, work through your design challenges, and get people the knowledge they need. So speaking about getting the knowledge you need, I'm going to put that at the front. Let's talk about your educational opportunities. Okay, so let's get our education on. So the Crestron Technical Institute has a number of online, in-person classes for design, engineering, configuration of an NVX system. We even have a field-led engineering class where we'll bring the lab to you. So we have plenty of offerings to get your education on, but you got to go now. This is where the supergroup, Crestron Sales Support Services, comes into play, along with your Crestron representative and TD. We've got answers to questions. So earlier I had talked about my transition here in my own home lab from traditional DM to NVX. Let's take a look at, say, I've got a design today that utilizes an 8x8 and I need to move it to NVX. So let's take a look at the 8x8 design real quick. So we have our usual suspects, the control processor, touch panel. We have our input group. We've got our output group. And in the middle, we've got the frame with all of its beautiful I/O cards. If you asked me to redesign that as NVX, this is what it would look like. So we have our usual suspects still. We still have our input groups. We still have our output groups. And in this case, we went ahead and threw an NVX frame in the rack for the local sources. But from the top end, it looks pretty much the same. It's just a smaller footprint. Why? Because the network becomes the core to the switching fabric, which then leads into a whole bunch of other questions. So let's deal with the security question first. All NVX devices, just like the rest of Crestron devices, supports 802.1x all the way to Active Directory and for hardening the boxes. We even have a whole bunch of government certifications to back all of this up. Where can I find information on this? Well, security.crestron.com, and specifically the security reference guide for NVX, for 4 series control systems, and the security guide for IP professionals. So now that we've got that part and you have references, let's get to where a lot of the FUD exists. Here in my own house, I'm the network administrator. The network administrator here, me, has rules, just like all network administrators. And they can range from I have a VLAN for my media, I have a VLAN for my AV, to that stuff has to be completely isolated. And NVX can work in all of those situations. There's just different things that you have to do. So for example, let's take the hardcore case where none of that stuff can be on my network. How do I manage, monitor, and isolate? Well, in this case, we're going to use a CP4N, the control subnet in isolation mode. And with XIO in play, we can actually use the XIO program connector to pass alerts up to XIO from the devices on the control subnet through programming. As we work up, we need it isolated. We want that traffic isolated, and we like the network, but it's okay if the devices reach out to the internet. Well, same thing. Inside the control subnet, uncheck the isolation mode. Northbound traffic flows. You can claim them into XIO. What about other tools? Well, we have the DM NVX tool, which allows us to update firmware, do configuration work, see everything in a grid view. We have the PowerShell EDK and EDK utilities to help with the configuration installation of things like certificates. And then there's the NVX director. Another great product for helping manage and monitor as well as configure. So between all of that in that aggregate, that pile, collectively, there's a solution to deal with whatever rule set is applied. Well, that covers the top end stuff. I really do appreciate you listening. Remember, if you have questions, Crestron's got you. Your dealer integrator, Crestron technical director, your Crestron sales rep, and most importantly, sales support services are here to help. Thanks for listening. I'm Otter. They gave me a mic. They gave me a camera. Said make a show. There you go. See ya.